Happening today, the Berkshire District Attorney is testifying at the State House in Boston about two bills. The first, criminalizing an act relative to sexual assaults by adults in positions of authority or trust. And the second law involves taking photos or videos of nude or partially nude people, otherwise known as upskirting. The DA hopes as a result of his efforts, taking images of adults without their permission will be a felony. He'd also want longer sentences for those who are taking these images of minors and create sentencing for following offenses.